I also teach children ages 1 to 4 age.
You are brave.
Oh.
As a mother of three, I have a special place in my heart for anyone who teaches. My name is Nabila Aguele, Chief Executive for Malala Fund in Nigeria, and I'm so excited to be here in conversation with the incredibly dynamic Funom Yakubu, a leader and girls' education champion, amongst many other things. Welcome, Funom.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Same. Thank you for being here. We are going to be speaking about girls' education in Nigeria. Funom, you'll be reflecting on the state of girls' education, your experiences, your work, and I will be sharing a little bit about our strategy and our plans for Nigeria. So to kick us off, I'd love for you, Funom, to share with me sort of your perspective on the state of girls' education in Nigeria today. What do you think are some of the key challenges that are holding girls back?
For girls' education in Nigeria, one thing that I've observed is while we have increased enrollment for girl children through, the works of even Malala Fund and other NGOs who are focused on girls' education, one key challenge that still remains is retention. Yes, girls are being enrolled, but are they in school? How are they thriving in school? Are they being equipped with all of the things that they need to survive and to, thrive in school? That's the question. It's one thing to enroll a child into school. It's another thing for you to do everything within your power to ensure that that child stays in school. What the classrooms look like, even linking it to SRHR. How is their menstrual health? Are they equipped in wash equipments to be able to take care of themselves while they're in school? So little things like that can discourage a child. Also, accessibility and affordability of sanitary pads. How easy is it for girls to afford those things? Prices of pads in Nigeria today are skyrocketing. So people who haven't had breakfast or lunch or dinner, they won't want to spend that money on, sanitary pads. And these are things that are normal. These are things that we go through every 28 days. Even expanding it to other menstrual health issues like, PCOS, all of those things. How are we helping girl children navigate the challenges of being girls and being girls in school? It's a whole package once we begin to unravel the onion.
Thanks so much for that, Funom. I mean, I think you've really painted a very comprehensive picture of some of the key challenges, with menstrual health and menstrual hygiene being a huge factor. We like to really situate our work and our conversations around girls' education within the current lived realities here in Nigeria. And we all know that there's a cost of living challenge, there's multidimensional aspects, economic issues that affect everybody. Can you speak to the ways in which sort of fuel prices, cost of food, etc., how those things are affecting you and others in the space, and maybe what that then means for those who are seeking to stay, to access and complete school?
I remember when the announcement came that said, fuel subsidy was being taken out. Things you could buy for 100K, monthly spending for your household just went up. And it still goes back to the responses from the first question, how it makes it, even more difficult for people who are barely earning, 35,000, 70,000, and then they have multiple children, and those children need to go to school. And even with public schools now, they collect some level of money from them. While they're not collecting school fees, there's still something they're collecting from them. How do those children go to school? I don't think those parents will be giving their children money to go to school. And then for girl children is even worse. What's the route that they are going to be taking? Because I remember in secondary school, my parents would give me money, and then I'll still pass a shortcut to make sure I get to school, just so I don't spend that money. And, those come with a lot of dangers. We're looking at sexual and gender-based violence against those girls. It's just a whole lot of things. I also think about girls who get to hawk on the streets. I know in Abuja it's quite different. I've not seen it as rampant as it is in states like Lagos. But those girls who have to hawk on the streets, it's very painful, driving or being in a car, and then you are seeing girls who are supposed to be in school selling pure water or selling, bottled water, whatever it is. They are prone to accidents on the road. What if a car hits them? There's just a lot of layers, and it all stems from, economic instability in the country and, inflation and all of those things.
I think what really struck me as you were speaking is that you are saying this as we sit having this conversation in Abuja, a major city in Nigeria, and we both sit here from a place of deep privilege compared to a lot of the girls that we seek to serve and their communities. And it's so important to understand that the current economic crisis and the macroeconomic circumstances are impacting everybody from the top all the way to the bottom. And what that means is, imagine in underserved rural communities, lower income households where, as you said, 30,000 naira is not even accessible. What does that then mean in terms of educating children, prioritizing girls versus boys, choosing to send them to school versus having them contribute to the household? These are such important aspects of why we do this work, but also how we do this work, that it needs to be focused on sustainable long-term solutions that take into account the economic and lived realities of the communities and girls we serve. So switching subjects a little bit, and linking sort of education financing, how is education financing critical when we think about girls' access and empowerment, an area that I know that you are an expert in and very passionate about?
I like to say in this world is run by money. Right? Even when we're organizing activities, for instance, you have to pay the vendors, you have to get the hall, you have to get a repertoire, everything needs money. And a man I respect quite well says, when I look at your bank account, when I look at how you are spending, if as a government we say we are very interested in ensuring that there's gender parity in education, then our funding should go to it. It starts from gender responsive budgeting. How have the budgets been put together? And what I've observed is a lot of the times we like to speak on behalf of people without taking into consideration what those people are speaking. And so most times the way it works is I speak, even though I'm not the one that is going through it, and then I tell you to come amplify what I have said. It should be the other way around. Let the girls speak, and let us then amplify, or let the women speak, and then let men amplify what women are speaking. Not men speaking on behalf of women and then asking the women, and you know how we usually do it, it's tokenism to some level, and then bring them in and say, okay, now repeat what I've just said. No, you've not lived my life. Again, it should be based on lived experiences, like you said. Only those who have won the show knows how painful it is to wear that show. And so that's why it's very important. Because you can't just have a school structure pop up on its own. Money goes into building, money goes into cement, money goes into the people who would work on building that school. Money goes into people who would consult with you to say, oh, this is what girls need. This is how the toilet should be built. This is how the classroom should be built. Are there ramps? How do people who have hearing impairment, how do they survive in school? Or do we build separate schools for them? There has to be some sort of reward for, the consultation. So at every step of it, money is important, right? And so if we say as a people we are interested in this, if we go to spaces like the UN and we're speaking all of the big English, all of the, diplomatic gibberish, it would not make sense unless our money is following what our mouth is saying. So that's why it's very important. And it's also very important to not just finance, but finance intentionally, finance with intersectionality in mind, finance with the girls telling you what they need you to finance for. That's the only way we can make it work. Because the government today can build a lot of schools, but it will not work for girls, The schools will not be gender responsive in their approach. The teachers will not be, trained properly to address some of the issues that girls, go through. So all of these little things are what makes it very important.
I loved what you said about words and intention matching resource allocation, right? Fundamentally, what you don't spend on or plan for in a way that is gender responsive. And for those who don't know, gender responsiveness means really thinking about the needs of everybody, girls, women, boys, etc. But really being intentional about the way planning is linked to the needs of the people we hope to serve, in this case, the girls, and that the money follows. And that without the two, you cannot have impact, which is very much, which really resonates with us, because under our new plan, we are focused on both the resourcing piece, the financing piece, as well as the rights. And you touched on something that I'd love for you to expand on, which is the importance of the voice of the girl. There's a tendency to pay lip service and to tokenize the voice of children. You know, when things are being launched, or as you said, being consulted after plans have been made. But can you talk a little bit more about why the voices and the wishes and the perspectives of girls are so important from the beginning in terms of informing education policy?
If you look at our political space, there are barely any ever women in there. And even when they are, like you said, tokenism. And so only someone who has menstruated, also only someone who has gone through, let's say, childbirth, for instance, can know what it feels like. Even though I don't know what that feels like, yeah? As opposed to, I can only imagine, I can only speculate. And that goes across the board, you know. And so for girl children, it's very important that their voices are included in the planning, right? Because I can assume, even goes down to when we are programming for people, you know, in the rural, you know, how to reach rural areas. I've never been in that space. I can only assume and say, this is what they would need. But that might be wrong. It's one thing for me to wish that you want something. It's another thing for me to ask you what you want and how you want me to do it. And so that's why it's very, very important to have people involved in the conversation from the beginning, from the planning to the drafting, to implementation, to budgeting. It's very important. Even in my program, yeah, for instance, there are times I have to admit that, you know, I have had oversight on some things. And then because we also program for persons with disability, women and girls with disability. When I think disability, I just think sign language interpretation and this and that. And so one of the persons with disability said, do you know that there are people who are also blind, who are also deaf? So when you bring a sign language interpreter and you cater for one person, and, you know, usually because we're trying to save costs, so we get just 2 general sign language interpreters. But for the person who's also blind and who's also deaf, the person needs, you know, them to hold the person's hand and sort of sign in a way that the person will understand. And so for me, it was like, oh, wow, I was doing this wrong. And that's because I didn't ask questions, you know. I just planned this program off the top of my head and then just did a budget. And, you know, I was like, okay, come for the activity. And the people that I need cannot even be there to, you know, enjoy the things that I am planning for them. And so that's why it's very important. And girls are not an homogeneous group, like I said. Even down to intersex girls, how do we program for them to be able to enjoy school? How do we build schools around them? How, in a way that doesn't seclude them like it's some abnormality, yeah? But include them so that they have some level of normalcy in their childhood. I also teach children ages 1 to 4.
So, you are brave. As a mother of 3, I have a special place in my heart for anyone who teaches those young kids.
Once I'm done, I come back and I am sleeping. I am exhausted.
Right.
I think it's just thinking beyond, not taking things as black and white, but saying that there are colors in between black and white, you know, and how does this affect every individual? I think that's it.
You know, I really couldn't agree more. And I loved what you said, which is that even as we talk about including the voices of these powerful girls who, as you know exactly what they need, what their challenges are. They are not blind to what's happening, and they have the solutions for themselves, and by extension also their communities have solutions. So also extending it to sort of what is the community perspective and how do we ensure that we're not putting in place measures that would then ultimately be rejected potentially at community level as well. And I think your reflection on the community leader and the borehole is very significant there. So with everything that we've said in mind, if you could make one ask, and I know it's hard, to government, one critical ask that could allow and ensure that more girls are able to access safe and quality education, what would that be?
I would say, I would wrap it up. I would say everything I want to say can be wrapped up into this. Be intentional. Be intentional in your planning. Look beyond yourself. Just look beyond yourself for a minute. Have some sort of out-of-body experience and look beyond your privilege as a man or as a man who has the power and who has the money, because that's what politicians do have. They don't just have power, they also have the money, right? So if you can look beyond yourself, because if I say funding, they can fund, but not fund the right way, because again, we've spoken about including them from the planning stage, from the drafting stage. But if you are intentional in your planning, it will reflect in the planning stage, it will reflect in the budget stage, it reflects in how you allow communities of girls and young women co-create with you, co-plan with you.
Amazing.
Yes.
I love that.
So now we've spoken about like girl education and, and linked it to SRHR, menstrual health and all of that. So I would like to know, we're in northern Nigeria. How has child pregnancy and child marriage, affected girls and communities as a whole? If you had to reflect on that, how would you say that has impacted even the work that you do at Malala Fund?
Thank you for this question. And it's such an important one because this group of girls, of adolescent girls who are impacted by marriage and adolescent pregnancy, are a big part of our focus in Nigeria under our new strategic plan. So child marriage and adolescent pregnancy are amongst the biggest barriers to access and completion of school for adolescent girls. In Nigeria, over 30% of girls are married under the age of 18. In the Northeast and the Northwest, that increases to over 50%. In those same regions, over 1 in 3 girls has already had a child before the age of 18. So we're not talking small numbers, not that it matters. We care about all girls, but when you look at what this group of girls represents, their percentage, really being intentional about their needs is critical. Girls who are married early, married as children, are less likely to be able to access and complete school, and in turn are less likely to educate their own children. There's also broader implications for their families and their communities. We talked earlier about the economic challenges and the difficult trade-offs that families and communities make. And in the moment, it may feel like the right idea to keep a girl at home because of immediate financial needs. But the data shows, both here and elsewhere, that ultimately, in the long run, investing in those girls' education, keeping them in school, leads to better outcomes for them. They're much better positioned to contribute to their immediate family and better outcomes for their communities, both in terms of their mindset, their ability to step into leadership, etc., their earning potential, their ability to make better decisions, health decisions, economic decisions for themselves and ultimately for their children as well. So these are huge barriers, and we have, unfortunately, a large percentage of girls. Nigeria in Central and West Africa represents the majority of girls who are married under the age of 18 in the entire region at over 20-something million. And that represents over a third. These numbers are big, and they have huge implications in terms of whether these girls access a complete school and the extent to which we're able to ensure their own children, both boys and girls, are able to go to school and break multi-generational cycles of poverty.
For me, one key thing that stands out is, it's an economic decision. To break out of poverty, you have to educate girls. Right? And that's one thing that stood out from me from what you just said. It's beyond, the moral of letting girls go to school. it's economically wise to let girls go to school, not just
Absolutely.
for themselves, but also for their communities. So that's brilliant. So I think the question now boils down to how do communities benefit? Because some parents will say, what's my gain? It almost feels like an investment. So how do communities, how do parents, how do families benefit from, supporting girl child education?
Communities and families benefit both in terms of what it means for the girls themselves, their ability to learn, to grow, to develop skills, to self-actualize, to be well positioned to move on to higher education, and to contribute more meaningfully to the immediate home and to communities at large. UNESCO has an incredible statistic, which is that globally about 15 to 30 million US dollars is lost in terms of productivity and earnings to education gaps, especially for girls. So we are not in a place where these discussions are sentiment. The data is there, both in terms of GDP, improved GDP outcomes, improved health outcomes, improved productivity, improved earning potential, both for her and ultimately her family. And fundamentally, a girl who does not complete school is less likely, virtually unlikely, to educate her own children. Not necessarily because she and her community don't intend her to, but because that is sort of the context. We talked about circumstances. We've talked a lot about economics. There's also social norms, etc. So for communities, I think part of what we hope to have better reflected from a community perspective and even from a policymaker perspective is that it's important that this information that we know as experts, that it is not just for the girl, it is for you as well. And in the long term, you will reap better benefits by keeping her in school. But then what does that then mean from a policymaking perspective? We also need to recognize that these communities are dealing with current pressing needs. And so there are factors, whether it's addressing hidden fees, whether it's looking at sort of the immediate economic loss of having a girl go to school, which is real. So it's not to say communities should just deal with it. It's that we need to factor that in making it make sense for them to put their girls in school. For all girls, but especially this set of girls that we're focused on. And we're focused on them because there are all the factors come into play. There's the care component. There is the factor around social norms. They're also sort of in this strange no man's land where they're no longer treated like children, but they're not adults yet. We continue to be incredibly shocked at the extent of the policy gap as it relates to these girls, considering how many of them there are in Nigeria. It's a new emerging area, this reentry, making sure that these girls are able to go back into school. So for us, this is a huge focus of our new 2025 to 2030 strategic plan, which we just launched last month. And this is a global effort in the amount of $50 million with a significant investment focused in Nigeria, where we're focusing on preserving the right to education of this really important category of girls who have been ignored and forgotten, and for whom current interventions are focused on informal programming, which is important and critical. But we need to take that programming and, as you said, put money and planning and intention behind ensuring that the school systems, from an infrastructure, from a teaching, from an everything perspective, are ready to welcome and ensure that these girls are able to access and complete school. There's no other way to get around it. And then the financing piece is also a priority for us. So we are in conjunction also continuing work that we've been doing around pushing for education, increased education financing, and, as you said, better quality and intentional spending. Are you planning? Are beneficiaries and girls at the table informing your plans? Or did you sit here in Abuja and come up with a plan and now ask states and local governments and communities to accept it? And are you budgeting? Where's the money going? And what are the monitoring systems in place? And we do this in partnership with local organizations. A big part of our values and our model is that this work is to be done by leaders, by champions, by activists who are running Nigerian organizations and who are close to the issues, both at community and policy level. So we are investing in and working closely with our partners and leveraging our platform to amplify their work and to center the voices and wishes of the girls that we plan to serve.
It's very interesting to hear about, Malala's strategy. And, we always say if only half of, your society is being gainfully employed, then what are you gaining? That's just half trying to cater to the other half. It's not economically sound to think that that's a solid plan.
So thank you so much, Funom. It's been such an enriching conversation, and we've touched on so many aspects of why barriers continue to exist, why it's important to center the voice of girls, and why this work really should be led by local and well-seasoned and knowledgeable champions such as yourself, and also the important role of girls and women and young women such as yourself across the board. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Nabila. Thank you.